So we're back at it here, and we are going to be doing radians now. So you can see that my angle has shifted from degrees to something that has pi in it. So I'm looking for the cosine of 7 pi over 4. So as I think about 7 pi over 4, that's telling me that I'm in radians. So I'm going to follow the same steps that I did before. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sketch that angle. So remember that this is pi and 2 pi, or 0. Now remember, when we were counting angles, that it's easiest if we change this pi into 4 pi over 4. And we'll change this 2 pi into 8 pi over 4. The reason why we're doing that is that's going to help us think about where 7 pi over 4 is. So this is 3 pi over 2, but let's think about that as 6 pi over 4, which is going to really help us see that 7 pi over 4 is all the way in this fourth quadrant. Okay, so now I have 7 pi over 4. I want to figure out how far I am until I get to that x-axis. So if I find my reference angle, I'm going to take 8 pi over 4 minus 7 pi over 4, and I get pi over 4. So that pi over 4 is what I'm going to use for my ordered pair for my chart. So pi over 4, I'm stealing this ordered pair, the radical 2 over 2, and I'm going to put that on my chart, just like I did with degrees. So radical 2 over 2 and radical 2 over 2. Now keep in mind that this is in its fourth quadrant, so I went to the right and I went down. So I have to have a positive negative for my ordered pair. So I've got my ordered pair. Now I'm just going to say, okay, I want cosine. The cosine, remember, goes with x. We don't have any flipping to do because we don't have one of the reciprocal functions. We don't have a tangent, so we don't have to worry about dividing. So I'm taking my x coordinate right there, radical 2 over 2. Bada bing, bada boom, you're done. All right, let's try the next one. Okay, so now I'm looking at the tangent of negative 3 pi over 4. So don't let that negative get to you, all right? If we are thinking about sketching angles, okay, negative just means that we're going to go around this way instead of going around this way. So this is still going to be pi, but it's going to be negative pi because it's halfway around the circle the other way. That's how we're going to think about it. Now, because these are pi over 4s, we're going to change this into negative 4 pi over 4. Okay, this one will be negative 2 pi or 0. So what we have to think about, because we're going the opposite way, this right here is really your pi over 2. But instead of thinking about pi over 2, let's go ahead and think about 2 pi over 4. Okay, just so that we can get those common denominators. So that's going to show us that negative 3 pi over 4 means my angle is going this way. So it's in that quadrant 3. So what I have to think about is, well, how much more until I get to this x-axis? How much farther? Well, that'd be another pi over 4. So my reference angle is going to be pi over 4. Again, if you don't get something off your chart, it's either a quadrantal angle or you're wrong. So I'm taking this ordered pair, same ordered pair as last time. So we're going to have radical 2 over 2, radical 2 over 2. And it's in this third quadrant, so I went left and down, which means I need 2 negatives. Negative, negative. All right, so now we're going to have to do the step 4. So we don't always do the step 4. We're going to have to divide because we have a tangent. So you've got to remember that tangent is y over x. So I'm going to take my y coordinate, my negative radical 2 over 2, and I'm going to divide by my x coordinate, my negative radical 2 over 2. So you're seeing that those cancel out. Negative radical 2 over negative radical 2 is just going to be a regular plain old 1. All right, let's look. All right, so we're checking out the cosecant of 11 pi over 6. So I'm going to go ahead and sketch my angle. Notice it's the same thing that we're doing every single time. So this is positive. So this is going to be 0 or 2 pi, and then all the way over here is going to be pi. Now because we're dealing with pi over 6, we're going to change this into 6 pi over 6, which means this guy will change into 12 pi over 6. There we go, 12 pi over 6. So if I want 11 pi over 6, let's remember that this is 3 pi over 2, but we're not going to think about that. We're going to change that into 9 pi over 6. That's what we want to work with. So where is 11 pi over 6? It's going to be all the way in this fourth quadrant. So if I want to find that reference angle, how far away am I? If this is 11 pi over 6 and I need to get to 12 pi over 6, we're 1 pi over 6 away. So we can do that. 12 pi over 6 minus 11 pi over 6 is pi over 6. And there we are. We're getting one of those reference angles from my chart because we did it right. Right? It's either going to be on your chart, a quadrantal angle, or you're wrong. So I'm going to take this pi over 6 ordered pair, that radical 3 over 2 1/2. I'm sticking it in this fourth quadrant here. Radical 3 over 2 1/2. And because it's in this fourth quadrant, I'm putting the appropriate signs. So to the right and down is positive and negative. So now that I've got my ordered pair, signs appropriate and everything, I can go and think about my cosecant. So I've got to remember that cosecant means I'm going to have to do a reciprocal. Now cosecant goes with sine. So we're really concerned with what the sine of 11 pi over 6 is. So sine is y. So I'm going to take this y coordinate and I'm going to say, okay, the sine is negative 1/2. But I don't want sine, remember? We want cosecant. So we're going to flip that. Oops, cosecant. And we're going to flip that and we're going to get negative 2 over 1, which simplifies to just negative 2. All right, so I've got one more example for you here. It's not on your notes, but I thought it was important because it's 17 pi over 3. So if you ever get an angle that is bigger than a circle, then you're going to want to make sure that you find that coterminal angle. And so before I sketch this, I'm going to say, okay, 17 pi over 3, I'm going to subtract a circle. I'm going to take off a circle. So I'm going to take off 2 pi. I'm going to take off 6 pi over 3. And now I'm going to get 11 pi over 3. And you see how that's still bigger than 2 pi? So I need something that's less than 6 pi over 3, because 6 pi over 3 is 2 pi. So I'm going to take off another circle. I'm going to take off another 6 pi over 3. And that's going to give me 5 pi over 3. So that's what I really want to look at. I want to try to figure out what the cotangent of 5 pi over 3 is. So 5 pi over 3 is actually the angle that I want to sketch. So as I think about sketching my angle of 5 pi over 3, remember that this is pi. We're going to change that to 3 pi over 3. This is 2 pi over here, but let's change that to 6 pi over 3. So this is going to be a fraction. So let's really understand that 5 pi over 3 is going to be in this quadrant here. It's closer to 6 than it is to 3. So my reference angle, that's my next step, is going to be 6 pi over 3 minus 5 pi over 3, which is pi over 3. Boom, we got something from our chart. So I'm going to take that ordered pair, stick it in my chart, and make sure my signs are right. So there's my positive and my negative. So this cotangent of 17 pi over 3, the only difference is that we sketched 5 pi over 3 is that we just don't have extra circles going around. It's going to be the same thing because they're coterminal. So that's why I wanted to show you this example. If you ever have something that's bigger than a circle, just get it down to something that's in your circle. So now I want cotangent. So cotangent is the reciprocal of tangent. So let's think that tangent is y over x. So my tangent is y over x. Now, because it's already a fraction, it might make the most sense if we understand if tangent is y over x, then cotangent is the reciprocal, so x over y. So I'm not expecting you to remember this. I want you to know that tangent is y over x, and then we'll flip it. So since I want cotangent, I'm going to go ahead and do the flipping right now. So I'm going to take that x, and I'm going to divide by that y. Remember what happens with those matching denominators? They cancel out. So now I have 1 over radical 3, and it's negative. Can't leave that radical in the denominator, so we'll do one more rationalizing here, and we'll end up with a negative radical 3 over 3. All right, great job, guys.